I was halfway through a bowl of alphabets, the milk still cold from the glass bottle in the fridge, when I made the decision. One of those mornings where everything looks normal, but something feels off in the air. It was Thursday, May 19th, 1977. Sunlight poured through our burnt orange kitchen curtains, dancing across the old linoleum floor. The Zenith radio on the counter, the one that looked like a brick with rabbit ears, was tuned in to Casey Kasem's Top 40. Glenn Campbell's Southern Nights was playing when I decided I wasn't going to school. The cereal box still had that yellow Evel Knievel promo sticker. Collect 5, get a free poster. And right there, between one spoonful and the next, staring at the chicken-shaped wall clock ticking away above the stove, I felt it. Today was the day. The day Star Wars opened. And not just anywhere. At the Mount Pleasant Drive-In, the same one where Dad took me to see Jaws 2 summers ago. But this time, I wasn't going with anyone. This time, I was going alone. And more importantly, I was skipping school for the first time in my life. I was 16, all elbows and knees with shaggy hair like Leif Garrett's and a faded Leonard Skynyrd tee I practically lived in. I was the kind of kid who spent more time fiddling with the 8-track player in the garage than studying algebra. But that day felt different. It wasn't just about the movie. It was about doing something for me, my way. Sneaking out wasn't easy. Mom worked early shifts at Sears behind the perfume counter, and Dad was already on the GM line before the sun came up. My little brother Danny was still fumbling with the laces on his Keds. When the school bus rolled past our house, I was crouched behind Dad's '71 Buick Skylark, clutching my backpack like it might give me away. Once I heard the bus engine fade, I tiptoed back inside, heart pounding. Being 16 in '77 wasn't exactly a walk in the park. We were stuck between our parents' play-it-safe mindset and a world whispering, do whatever you want. And Star Wars? Man, Star Wars was promising something we didn't even know we were hungry for. Space battles, laser swords, heroes with cool jackets, ships that sounded like angry vacuums. There was magic in that trailer. And I knew I had to be there on opening day. I waited until around 9:30 a.m. The street was dead quiet. Just old Mr. Feldman hosing down his Cutlass Supreme like he did every Thursday. I rolled my Schwinn out through the garage, bright red with Speed Racer stickers peeling off the frame, and stuffed my backpack with the essentials, a thermos full of Tang and 2 ding-dongs wrapped in foil. I was ready. I pedaled downtown to Joey's Diner, right next to the old KB Toys that was already halfway boarded up. I stopped in, hoping maybe one of my buddies had the same idea, but the place was nearly empty. Just Brenda, the waitress, hair in a pencil bun, refilling coffee for a pair of truckers. I ordered a strawberry milkshake and parked myself near the jukebox, flipping through a tattered, cracked magazine while Aerosmith's Back in the Saddle blared from the speakers. I figured I'd hang there till the drive-in opened its gates, but fate, as it often does, had other plans. That's when I saw him, sitting alone in the last booth by the window. Brown suit, kind of rumpled, gray hair slicked back. He wasn't reading his paper, more like staring through it. Every so often he glanced up, not in a creepy way, more like recognition, like we were both part of the same secret club. I don't know what made me do it, but when he stood up and wandered over to the counter for a refill, I followed. He turned, gave me this quiet kind of smile and said, "Gonna see the movie too?" And just like that, it all started. The man didn't look like much at first. Just another guy passing through town, probably on some sales run or business detour. But there was something in the way he stood there at Joey's counter, sipping his black coffee from one of those thick white mugs with a hairline crack down the side, like he'd been there 1,000 times before. I shrugged and said, "Yeah, first showing. I've been counting down since April." He raised an eyebrow, smiled again, and nodded toward the booth. "Mind if I sit a minute?" I didn't say no. We sat across from each other, both of us with nothing but time and a faint buzz of anticipation humming in the background. Brenda came by with a refill, called him Han, and plopped down the check. He didn't even look at it. "So," he said, folding his hands together like he was about to start a poker game, "you skipping school for this?" I smirked. "That obvious?" He laughed, the kind of laugh that sounds like someone who remembers what it's like to be young and stupid and a little brave. "Don't worry, kid. I did the same thing in '68 for 2001, A Space Odyssey. My dad grounded me for a week, worth every second. That broke the ice. We talked for a while, Movies, music, the usual. He asked what I was into. I told him I liked messing with electronics, taping songs off the radio, hanging out at Aladdin's Castle arcade over at the mall. I was saving up for an Atari, still stuck with my old Magnavox Odyssey, and a mess of plastic overlays for the screen. He nodded like he understood all of it, even if he probably didn't. The jukebox clicked and whirred again. Now it was Dreams by Fleetwood Mac, soft and slow, drifting through the diner like a memory. That song always reminded me of Sunday drives with Mom, back when Dad still used Armor All on the dashboard, and we thought the Pinto was the coolest thing on four wheels. By 11:15, I was getting restless. "You heading to the drive-in?" I asked. He hesitated, then glanced at his watch. An old Timex with a cracked leather band. Was thinking about it. Got nowhere else I need to be. There was something sad in that sentence. Not dramatic sad, just empty sad. Like someone who used to have somewhere to be, and now didn't. That kind of sadness sits deep in your gut, even when you don't fully understand it yet. We stood up, settled the bill. He insisted on covering my shake, and stepped outside. The sun had climbed high and the air had that dry, slightly metallic scent of early summer. You know the one. Like hot pavement and mowed grass and something faintly sweet you can't name. His car was parked just down the street. A Datsun 280Z, mustard yellow with chrome trim. My jaw dropped. "This yours?" He grinned. "Fastest thing I ever owned. Want a lift?" Now, I know what you're thinking. Some 16-year-old kid getting into a car with a stranger? Today they'd call that a Lifetime movie waiting to happen. But back then things were different. People were different. There was trust, or maybe just ignorance, or maybe a little bit of both. Either way, I nodded. I stuffed my bike into the tiny hatchback, it barely fit, and climbed into the passenger seat. The interior smelled like peppermint gum and old leather. He handed me a pack of Razzles from the glove box. "Ever tried these?" "Yeah," I said, unwrapping one. "Starts as candy, ends as gum. Weirdest thing ever." He laughed again and turned the key. The engine roared to life like a lion clearing its throat. We hit the road with the windows down and the radio up. WGRD 98. 1FM was spinning Feels Like the First Time by Foreigner, and it felt like a movie scene. Me, this mystery man, the road stretching out like a ribbon toward whatever came next. And for a moment, everything felt right. But halfway to the drive-in, just past the bowling alley and the old Woolco sign, the car started to sputter. "Damn," he muttered, pulling off to the side. "Overheating. Should have known." He popped the hood and smoke hissed out like a dragon's breath. I stood there, backpack slung over one shoulder, staring at the engine like I could will it back to life. We were 4 miles out. Gates opened at noon. I looked at him, then at the road, then back again. "What do you think?" he asked. I paused. "I think we can make it if we walk." He stared at me for a second, then nodded. "All right, kid. Let's hoof it." And so we did. 2 unlikely companions, a 16-year-old runaway and a stranger with a broken car, walking down the side of Route 31 with the sun beating down and the world stretching out ahead. I still didn't know his name. We walked for what felt like forever. The sun was high. No clouds. No shade. Just the buzz of cicadas and the distant hum of cars whooshing past. Every few minutes we'd pass a roadside sign. "Try the new bacon burger at Burger Chef," or "Pepsi free 2 for 1. Gas and Go Mart." It was the kind of stuff you barely noticed back then, but now, it all comes flooding back. The textures, the colors, even the faded paint on the snack shop billboards. Like stepping into an old Polaroid. The guy didn't talk much during that walk. Neither did I. But it wasn't awkward. It was like we were both listening to something else. The world around us. Or maybe something inside. We stopped once, outside a closed-down photomat booth, just to catch our breath. He pulled out a pack of Fruit Stripe gum and handed me a stick. "Still the loudest rapper in the history of candy," he said, smiling. We finally made it to the Mount Pleasant Drive-In a little after noon. There was already a line of cars snaking along the entrance. Engines rumbling, windows rolled down. Families passing around tab and snowballs from the gas station across the street. A group of kids were playing frisbee on the grass. I saw a couple guys from school. Mark Baker and that tall kid from shop class, can't remember his name. But I ducked behind the popcorn stand before they noticed me. Last thing I needed was someone ratting me out to Coach Bailey. The old man, I still didn't know his name, paid our way in. He handed the kid at the booth a $5 bill and told him to keep the change. That got us 2 lawn passes and a spot near the back, under one of the old rusted speaker posts. We didn't have a car, obviously, so we set up camp on the gravel. Me on my army surplus poncho, him on a faded beach towel he'd had in his glove box. By now the lot was filling fast. Everywhere you looked, people were hanging out of Chevys, Pontiacs, Dodge Darts, some with coolers, others with transistor radios perched on dashboards. I spotted a family in a wood-paneled station wagon, kids in the back wearing Star Trek pajamas already passing around a bucket of homemade popcorn in a Folgers can. A guy in a straw hat was selling hot dogs out of a cart near the projection shack, and the air smelled like hot asphalt and mustard and gasoline. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. Just past 1 p.m., the trailers started to roll. Close Encounters, Smokey and the Bandit, The Spy Who Loved Me. People clapped. Someone honked their horn. I looked over at the stranger and he just nodded toward the screen like, here we go. And then, that music, that now famous goosebump-making, heart-pounding BAM of the opening Star Wars theme. Those yellow letters scrolling up into space like they were being pulled by God himself. And I swear, everyone in that drive-in went still. No talking, no chewing, no fiddling with radios. Just eyes wide open and mouths slightly agape. I remember looking around. Families, teenagers, couples, even some of the crustier-looking Vietnam vets with camo jackets and beer cans. All frozen, all caught in the same spell. And then I looked at him. His eyes were wet. Not full-on crying, but close. The kind of look someone gives when something hits too close to home. First time I've been excited in years, he whispered, almost to himself. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Halfway through the movie, right around the cantina scene, he leaned in and said, my son would have been your age. And that's when the whole day shifted. I didn't know what to say. My stomach kind of turned. I nodded barely and looked back at the screen. You ever have a moment like that? One where the world feels different all of a sudden, like someone flipped a light switch in your heart? If you have, tell me. I want to know I wasn't the only one. Because after that I couldn't stop wondering, who was this guy? What had he lost? And why did fate put me there, of all days, to walk 4 miles next to him and watch Star Wars like we were family? The sun started to dip behind the trees. The light from the screen danced across windshields and metal bumpers. I sat there with half a ding-dong in my hand. No appetite. Just this weird ache in my chest that didn't have a name yet. And still, even with all of that, I knew I'd never forget this day. The light from the movie flickered across our faces, casting blue and green and golden flashes as X-wings zipped through space and laser blasts ricocheted across the screen. I should have been totally locked in, right? 16 years old watching Star Wars on opening day. And not just watching, but feeling it, in the very bones of my being. And I was. But I was also watching him. He sat with his legs stretched out, hands folded on his stomach, eyes fixed straight ahead like he didn't dare blink. Every now and then he'd give this little smile. Not wide, just enough to crease the corners of his eyes. But every smile seemed stitched to something deeper, something old, something sad. It wasn't until Luke stood on that desert ridge, with the twin suns setting behind him and the John Williams swell rising like a storm, that he finally spoke again. His name was Toby, he said. I turned toward him slowly. Your son? He nodded. Didn't look at me, just stared at the screen. He was into space, obsessed with it. Had this telescope he bought with paper route money. Used to drag me out at 3 a.m. just to show me a speck of light he'd tracked for weeks. I didn't always get it, but he did. He really did. He cleared his throat and rubbed his hand across his chin, where stubble had started to creep in since morning. Leukemia took him 2 years ago. He was 12. My heart sank. I didn't know what to say. What can you say? I stared down at the gravel between us, picking at a little rock with my fingernail. There were voices from nearby cars, laughing, whispering, kids asking questions their parents couldn't answer. But all of it felt far away, like we were in a little bubble, just the two of us, floating somewhere between the screen and the stars. Do you mind me sitting here? I asked. He looked at me, surprised. What? I can go if you'd rather watch alone. He shook his head slowly, and for the first time that day, he put a hand on my shoulder. Just rested it there, solid, grounded, real. No, I want you here, he said. Feels right. The Death Star exploded. People cheered. Someone honked a horn. A little girl near the snack bar shouted, "Did you see that?" And I caught myself grinning, despite everything. We shared a Pepsi free and finished the ding-dongs. He told me Toby would have loved the droids. He had a thing for gadgets, he said. Took apart the microwave once. Thought it could talk to aliens. That made us both laugh, loud and real. And God, it felt good. By the time the credits rolled, the sky had turned velvet blue dotted with early stars. The lot was buzzing. Engines starting, snack wrappers crinkling. People piling into cars already retelling scenes they'd just seen. The magic still hung thick in the air. I looked around, taking in every detail. The flicker of the film slowing down as the reel ended. The crackle of the speaker posts. The fading scent of popcorn and exhaust fumes. The way kids clung to their parents, wired from sugar and space battles. And for a second, I didn't want to leave. I wanted to stay in that moment forever. With him, with the feeling. He stood up and stretched, groaning like old men do. "Guess we should find a ride," he said, brushing gravel off his pants. We asked around, half joking, until a couple in a blue AMC Pacer offered to drop us off near the diner. I don't remember their names. Maybe I never knew. But I remember the warm vinyl seats, the way the woman smelled like Jean Naté cologne, and how the man kept glancing at us in the rear view like we were some kind of story he couldn't quite figure out. As we rode back, windows down, I leaned my head against the glass and closed my eyes. The wind in my hair, the buzz in my chest, the heaviness in my heart, all of it mixed together. We got out near Joey's. My Schwinn was still chained up out front. I bent down to unlock it, hands shaking a little, not from fear, just from something. He stood beside me watching the cars roll by. I figured he was about to leave, that this was the end. But then he said, "Can I tell you something?" I looked up. "Yeah? I almost didn't come today." Woke up, thought about driving east, just getting on the highway and not stopping. But something told me to stay, to see this, to remember. He paused, eyes fixed on the glowing red sign above the diner. "Then I saw you. And for a moment, it felt like he was sitting with me again. That broke me. I blinked fast and nodded, trying not to cry like a baby in the middle of the sidewalk. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a little pin, silver, shaped like a tiny telescope. He pressed it into my hand. "For the stars," he said, "and for Toby." I watched him walk off down the street, slow and steady, like he wasn't in a rush anymore. And I stood there with my bike, holding that little pin, wondering how a single day could change a person forever. I rode home in silence. The streets were quieter than I expected, like the whole town had taken a breath and was holding it in. Street lamps flickered to life, casting yellow halos on the pavement. The sky above was still deep blue, but the stars were sharper now, colder. They didn't feel like a backdrop anymore. They felt reachable, like I'd just come back from one of them. The little telescope pin sat in my front pocket, and I kept tapping it with my thumb as I pedaled past the shuttered Woolworths, past the movie marquee where Star Wars now blinked in bold plastic letters. There were still a few folks out, a couple teens sitting on the hood of a Camaro passing a joint under the sodium lights. Mr. Kowalski closing up his barber shop, the bell jingling behind him. But I was somewhere else. Not in space. Not really. I was somewhere between boyhood and whatever came next. When I finally rolled into our driveway, the porch light was on. A telltale sign. My mom was home, and she knew. Not just about me skipping school, and she could smell that from a mile away, but that something was different. Moms are weird that way. I opened the back door slowly. The house smelled like shaken bake and pine sol. The Zenith console TV buzzed from the den, playing reruns of MASH with the volume low. My brother Danny was passed out on the couch with a Flintstones blanket wrapped around him and a half-eaten fudge-striped cookie still in his hand. Mom stood at the sink sipping from her Pepsi-free glass, back-turned. "You're late," she said. "Yeah," I answered, setting my backpack down, trying not to rustle the wrapper where the second ding-dong was still tucked inside. She turned to face me, arms crossed, tired eyes, that powdery scent of Max Factor still clinging to her skin. "You weren't at school." I didn't lie. Couldn't. "Nope." She raised an eyebrow, waiting. "I went to see a movie." "Star Wars?" she asked, like it was a crime. I nodded. She sighed, leaned against the counter, and stared at me for a long second. Then she said the last thing I expected. "Was it worth it?" I swallowed hard. My eyes started to sting a little. "Yeah," I said. It really was. She walked past me and ruffled my hair. All right, but you're mowing the lawn and cleaning the garage this weekend. Fair, I said, voice cracking a little. I went to my room and collapsed onto my waterbed. That ridiculous blue vinyl thing that squeaked like a haunted swing set. The Rolling Stones poster on my wall tilted slightly as I dropped my shoes to the floor. I lay there, staring at the ceiling tiles, my fingers still wrapped around the pin in my pocket. That's when I cried. Not loud, not messy, just quiet. A few tears sliding down the side of my face into the corner of my pillow. I wasn't crying for me. I was crying for Toby. For that man whose name I still didn't know. For all the people out there with empty chairs at their dinner tables and memories they carry like secret luggage. It's funny, isn't it? How a movie, a stranger, and a skipped school day can rearrange the furniture in your soul. I kept that pin. Years later, when my own kid was born, I found it tucked inside an old cigar box with my Fleetwood Mac cassettes, my first baseball mitt, and a picture of me and my dad in front of the Skylark. I pinned it to my son's diaper bag. Not because he'd understand, but because I needed to carry that story forward. Even if it was just in a whisper. I never saw that man again. I thought about going back to Joey's the next day just in case. But something told me he was already gone. Maybe back on the road. Maybe chasing stars. Or maybe, just maybe, he only existed for that one day. Like a character written just for me. To appear and disappear like the Falcon in hyperspace. Do you believe in things like that? In people arriving just when you need them, even if you don't know it yet? 'Cause I do. That day didn't just change my relationship with movies or rebellion or even grief. It changed my relationship with time. Because now, whenever I look back, it doesn't feel like a memory. It feels like a bookmark in my soul. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't skipped school that day. What if I'd taken the bus like every other Thursday, sat through geometry with Mrs. Reinhardt and her chalk-covered cardigans, passed notes during lunch about nothing that mattered? What if I'd gone home, watched Three's Company reruns while eating Totino's pizza rolls and let Star Wars come and go like any other movie? Would anything have changed? Would I have? See, it's not just about the film, though God knows that movie blasted open my imagination like a firecracker in a mailbox. It was about the day, the choice, the heat of the pavement, the click of the 8-track, the gum wrappers, the smell of diner grease and lawn clippings and Brenda's perfume that lingered in the booth, the Datsun that broke down on Route 31, the telescope pin, the stranger who somehow became something more. He reminded me, without even meaning to, that people carry stories with them like pockets full of stones. Some of those stories are too heavy to speak out loud, but they come tumbling out anyway, in between fries and refills, or under the light of a drive-in screen, where the past feels a little less sharp and the future isn't asking too many questions yet. I never knew his full story, didn't need to, but I knew what it meant, that sometimes we're just there to witness each other, to listen, to sit in the silence between two twin suns setting over a desert we'll never walk, and feel like we understand something, even if we can't put it into words. And you know what else? I never told anyone about that day. Not for years. Not to my friends. Not even to my parents. It felt too sacred. Too soft. Like if I said it out loud, it would disappear. I kept it tucked away, like the last marshmallow in a box of Lucky Charms, saved for when I really needed it. I've told my son now, of course. He's older than I was then. I even took him to a revival screening when they brought Star Wars back to the old restored theater downtown. Not the same as a drive-in, sure, but close enough if you squint. He didn't say much after. Just nodded a lot. Smiled in the same quiet way the stranger did. And that was enough for me. We all have our days like that, don't we? Days that sit in the back of our minds like a Polaroid you forgot was tucked behind a light bill in the junk drawer. Days that come back to you through smells or songs, or the sound of a movie starting up in the dark. So if you're reading this or listening or just remembering, maybe you've got a day like mine. A day you weren't supposed to have. A person you weren't supposed to meet. A story that only makes sense years later. If you do, I'd love to hear it. Because May 19th, 1977, wasn't just the day Star Wars came out. It was the day a 16-year-old kid skipped school, sat in the dirt with a grieving stranger, and learned that sometimes the best stories don't need special effects. Just a little courage, a little kindness, and a seat under the stars.